What's up, everyone? Today I'm doing something different and sharing my first ever podcast interview on why we started Made With Lau. It's the first time I've really opened up publicly about my childhood, my identity as a Chinese American, my relationship with my parents over the years, and how all the dots connected to where we are today, which is making YouTube videos and sharing my family's Chinese recipes with all of you. This was an interview I recorded with Kyle Leung, the host of the podcast What Kind of Asian Are You? And I had a lot of fun getting to connect with Kyle and share our stories, and he does an incredible job as a host, asking deep questions and getting to the heart of things. And so if you enjoyed this interview, make sure to check out our description for links to What Kind of Asian Are You?, where he features conversations with diaspora Asians about their lives, stories, and experiences. Before we dive into this interview, I'm really excited to announce that we're launching a Patreon community. If you're not familiar, Patreon is a great platform that allows you to directly support creators like us that create content that you love. I started creating these videos to honor my parents' legacies, explore my heritage, and to be able to preserve and celebrate Chinese cuisine and culture with all of you. This has quickly become one of the most fulfilling things I've ever worked on, and it's even more fulfilling getting to connect with all of you and hear your heartwarming stories in the process. All that being said, it takes me about 50 to 60 hours to produce a recipe video every single week, and I could definitely use some help. In the short term, I'd love to be able to hire someone to help us create subtitles, which usually takes us about 10 to 12 hours every week. In the long term, I'd love to start producing other types of content like a family recipe book, or even potentially revisiting China with my parents and family to explore where they grew up and uncover some of the recipes and stories from their past lives. If you enjoy these videos and want to support us being able to continue creating content for many years to come, we'd love for you to consider becoming a patron of Made With Lau. As a Patreon supporter, some of the perks we're launching with include getting shoutouts and credits in our episodes, browsing our recipe blog ad-free, and helping to decide on the recipes that we share and the questions that we answer in them. If you're interested, please check out the link in our description for more information on becoming a Patreon supporter. Either way, thank you so much for your support. We look forward to sharing many more recipes to come and warming many more hearts and bellies along the way. Without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy the interview.
Hello, Randy. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. It's great to be here, Kyle. It's just an honor to be on your show and to get to share our story with you guys. So what we do, I'm the creative, I guess, behind the YouTube channel Made With Lau. Made With Lau is a recent project. We launched in September, but the whole idea is to just honor and celebrate my dad's cooking and my parents' legacy. So every week we share a Chinese recipe of his. He's been a chef for over 50 years. And so, we basically just highlight a recipe of his, and then we sit down and eat afterwards. And I feel like that is kind of what sets us apart, is like that conversation time is like, it's just a chance for us to, well, really it's like a chance for me to learn some of the stories about my parents that I never heard before, and also to like kind of like dive into more of Chinese culture and like the nuances of Chinese cooking and just convey a sense of family. I guess that's...
Yeah, I really appreciate like the cooking, of course. Like your dad has recipes are really good, and like food that I grew up eating as well. But then like the last part where you're just sitting with your family eating the food that he just made, that's very special, because not only do you guys talk about the food, how it's made, and like the history, and just very good like family time conversation you have. And I think it's nice for people to be able to see that, because not a lot of times do we really show like Asian families really talking about certain things without it feeling like it's like a lesson or like they're arguing and stuff. So I really thank you for that. And we'll get talking more about your channel in a bit, of course. But I want to start off with like this question that I normally ask my guests is, what kind of Asian are you? You can be as specific as you want or as vague. It's all up to you.
In broad terms, I am a Chinese American. So I was born and raised in California, the San Francisco Bay Area. I think I don't really know how to classify the type of Asian I am, other than like what you'd put like on the census survey, but like
yeah.
But I think I think I am a Chinese. I think the best way to put it is I'm a Chinese American, and like I've always kind of felt like, especially when I was younger, kind of like not quite either of those things, like not Chinese enough, but not American enough. A lot of Asian Americans maybe have the same sentiment where, like they're not as in touch with their Asian culture, but they're not like their white friends. So I've kind of felt that a lot of my life. So I think in that sense, I would, if I could put another metaphysical label on it, like kind of an Asian American that's straddling two cultures and trying to find a sense of identity in being an Asian American.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that, and I relate to that myself. But in terms of you feeling like that, do you feel like a lot has to do with like kind of just how you were raised, how you're brought up, and your family in terms of them being immigrants in America and all that stuff? So how was your childhood like?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with my childhood for sure. I think like most Asian parents, they worked really hard. They immigrated here. They immigrated here in the 1980s, and then I was born in 87. At the time, they had a Chinese restaurant, and it was pretty grueling, like even more grueling than the work that they did after not having the restaurant, because the restaurant burned down. Someone, this is kind of a segue, but we had a restaurant for a few years, and then someone in a neighboring business like burned it down. Basically, they burned down the entire plaza.
Oh
wow. But I think that was kind of a blessing in disguise because like all of the Chinese restaurant owners that my dad knows, like the parents don't really have a lot of time to spend with their kids, and it's just it's like a strain on the family. So we definitely felt that. My parents worked a lot. Like they definitely like were loving parents, and like I have like no qualms about like how I was raised, but I think like compared to like an American family, like I lived in a very white area. I guess I still kind of do, but it's a little more Asian now. But compared to, my American friends, like holidays were very different at my house. Like just kind of going over to their houses and seeing like everyone's talking at dinner or like, they're all like getting together at Christmas and singing songs and exchanging presents. Like not that we didn't have any of that, but it's definitely muted. So I guess that's like part of the American, like not feeling American enough. Like I wasn't exposed to sports or like, all the shows that people watch when we didn't have like Nickelodeon is a big channel here in America, and I didn't have access to that as a kid. So I just felt like disconnected from American culture, but also on the Chinese side, like I'm not fluent in Cantonese. I don't speak Mandarin at all. So it's just like when I'm around people who are, more immersed in Chinese culture, like I also don't feel like I didn't feel like I quite belonged in that either. So that was kind of like, yeah, just tying it back to childhood, like I always had like a language barrier with my dad. And well, I grew up speaking Chinese until I was like 4. And then I started learning English as I got to grade school. At the same time, this was like around the time our restaurant burned down. So my mom was transitioning into a career in nursing. So we kind of learned English together. And my mom was primarily the one who took care of me like in the daytime. And then at night I'd be sleeping and my dad came home at night. So I didn't really have a lot of like face-to-face time through my youth with my dad because he worked like pretty long hours even after the restaurant burned down. Like he worked as a chef in other Chinese restaurants, and those hours are pretty long. Like he got home at like 10 p.m. I mean, he did what he had to do. Like he had to feed our family, and but as a result, like my Chinese didn't really progress after the age of like 5. I think as a result, like I didn't really have, like I always knew my parents loved me, my dad loved me, but like we never had that communication channel that I wouldn't say like every kid has a like clean communication channel with their parents, but like at least most people can speak the language of their parents, and I didn't have that. So that was like a big strain on my childhood for sure.
Yeah, I relate to that too, because like yourself, like my dad spent most of his time working, and it was primarily my mom kind of raising me during the day and all that stuff. And yeah, I didn't have like a clear communication with my dad either. It's kind of like even now is like kind of where there isn't really too big of a language barrier for my dad and I, as I could speak Cantonese with him. But like at the same time, like I think for what has happened during childhood, it kind of affected how we kind of talk even now. Because I think during our childhood, the best kind of communication we had was just him asking like, "Oh, how's your day? That you eat, and like how's school?" And
Yeah, exactly.
But like even now, it's like for me, at least with my relationship with my dad, is kind of like almost the same. Like, "Oh, how's work? How's things are in your family and all that stuff." So yeah, and it's hard to get to a point where it seems like in your video, at least, you're kind of bridging more kind of towards the way where you guys have more of a casual conversation where you can ask him more about different things. So it's nice to see it in your videos that you and your dad has this kind of communication now. I'm sure it wasn't always like this.
No. Yeah, I mean, like what you're saying, like I think I always like describe to my friends who ask, it's like I know enough Chinese to operate logistically in life with my dad, like what I want to eat, what time do I have to go to school, but just like deeper things, like what's going on with like my relationships, or you know, what are my insecurities, or like what do I need help with, or like as a teenager, you know, like those things were very difficult to convey. And also like, I mean, it's also on me, like I definitely could have tried to explain those things, but it's also like just most days I just felt like being in my silo. You know, we'd have dinner a bunch of times and I would just sit in silence, like thinking of all the things I would want to say, but like just not saying anything.
For sure.
So I think like this whole channel is also like kind of an opportunity for me to reconnect with my dad and my parents, and to like have an opportunity to just like sit down with him every week and just pepper him with questions about his life.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that. Like, it's so nice. So with all that being said, so would you say like your kind of childhood is kind of pretty typical in terms of like how a lot of Asian Americans would have had childhood wise if they had a Asian American home life where their immigrant parents kind of worked and stuff? Or do you think yours kind of still kind of different from others?
I don't think I'm that unique in my like overall experience. Like I'm sure there were some nuances that I think every child has nuance in how they're raised. But I think like the overarching story of like immigrant parents trying to make it in America, working long hours, like I think that's pretty common.
How was your schooling like? How was life at school and all that stuff, and college and all that stuff for you? School, I think my parents, they made a strong emphasis on like studying outside of school, and I hated them for it at the time, but like I was a really good student. So school was like, up until college at least, school was like very easy for me. Oh, that's great.
Because I was so far ahead of, at least until high school, like I was like consistently like a top student. So I think, I mean, that comes with like a stigma, like, you know, like, oh, he's a nerd, or he's a dork. I mean, like kind of stereotypical Asian. But like I didn't really have a hard time in school. I think like socially, I don't think the fact that I studied so much helped, like hindered me from like having a more developed social life, but like it definitely took me away from things like sports, or you know, like organized activities where people develop more social skills. So I was kind of like a late bloomer, I think, like socially. So, and like I think like not having as many conversations at home with my parents, like that probably didn't help the development of my social skills. But I think in high school, like I started to kind of come out of my shell, and actually in eighth grade, like basically in fifth grade, there's like, I don't know how schooling is in Singapore if you're familiar with the American school system, but like there's like K through fifth grade, kindergarten through fifth grade is like one school. Usually all of those students go to like the same middle school, which is like 6th through 8th grade, and then high school is like 9th through 12th. So basically all of those transitions, I went to a different school than what everyone else, the gateway school that everyone else would go to.
So you had to make friends every time, new friends.
Right. Yeah, I had to make new friends pretty much new friends every single time. So like 6th grade, I like sat kind of with like an outcast. I don't want to say outcast, but like we didn't really fit in elsewhere. Like, and we didn't really talk at lunch either, but we just sat to sit together. And then like 8th grade, I was like 7th grade, I kind of started making friends, and then like 8th grade, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna sit down with this group of people, and I'm just gonna keep sitting with them until I'm friends with them. And that actually worked. Like they were like, I'm still friends with a lot of them to this day, but that was kind of like my first social risk, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, and just like kind of stepping out of my shell. And then high school, yeah, I had to start all over. It was like, it just took a while. And then by senior year, I like really got out of my shell. I started like really found like my first passion for the arts. So I joined a dance team.
Oh, okay.
And that like really like took me out of my shell. I think for the first time I felt confident in something other than like something academic.
Were you in like a hip hop crew or a team or something like that?
Yeah. So it was like, basically it was like, it's called like dance production, but like basically it's like part of the school curriculum. Like that's like a class.
Oh, okay.
But you have to try out to get into it. I think most guys get into it because there's not a lot of guys that try out, but like for women or for females, it's very hard to get into. So it was like kind of an elite thing, but I just happened to like stumble into it because I was like one of the few guys that tried out. But like in doing so and like kind of like learning how to move and like be comfortable with my body physically, it like naturally I think translated to me being more comfortable with like who I was. And then in college I joined a dance team, and that like, so I went to UCLA. And like there I really found like my people. Like I really found like people that I could relate with, other Asian Americans that were on my wavelength. Not just Asian Americans, but like I just found like a group of people that I really identified with.
That's really cool. And it's always interesting to hear, like I see a lot of Asian Americans talk about their general experience of like getting out of their shell, and one of the things they always kind of mention is like, oh, I joined a dance team, whether in high school or like I was in a dance crew in college and stuff, and it's like always like that's what they got into, and then it's like that's how I became interested in pursuing arts or whatever, or like at least getting more in tune with who they are as a person. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, I've never done a sport, but I think like dance is so like, it can be very introspective, and like you're so vulnerable with a group of other people. So it's just like, I feel like it just accelerates your development.
So you did dance throughout your college time?
Yeah. So I took 5 years in college instead of 4, because I studied engineering. And all 5 of those years I was on the dance team, and I started basically every year I would contribute a piece of choreography for the team. And like you've probably heard of like people, assuming you've talked to other people who were on dance teams, but this is basically like another major.
Is it? Oh, wow.
Because it was like, and you get like no credit for it, because like at least in Southern California, like at that time, I think the dance scene has grown a lot, but like at that time, like before YouTube, before you could really access things as readily as you can on the internet now, like I think the dance scene was like, at least collegiately, it was pretty much limited to just Southern California. And I think with being so close to like the Hollywood dance scene, and like it was just like the competition was insane. So like to even like get to that level where we were, I guess, on par with other dance teams, like we had to train a lot. And yeah, so we danced from like 8 p.m. to like 2 or 3 a.m. At least twice a week, and then like for weeks or months at a time it'd be like every day. So it was just like I wouldn't change anything about it, but it was like, it's pretty grueling. But I think at the same time it like just bonded me really closely with the people I was on the team with. And you know, eventually like evolving into like leadership roles and mentoring other people. I think it just really, it was very like, that was like one of the best things I got out of college, was just like finding myself through that art, and like evolving as a leader and finding confidence in things, and just finding a group of people that I really identified with.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's very life changing kind of experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it just kind of helped you kind of identify with a particular kind of group, and also kind of who you are as a person. In a sense, like you took on like you are a dancer and all that stuff. And you said you were studying at UCLA, where I think for most people they know that it has a reputation for there's a lot of Asians that go to that school.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, did that help with your kind of identity kind of, I don't want to say issue that you had, but like your identity kind of questions of how Asian you are and how American you are? Did that help, or kind of shown you a different light of how you can look at the issue?
Yeah, I think just for sure. I think just being around so many other similar Asian Americans who, to many varying degrees, had the same like core conflict that I had. It was just like I felt less alone. Whereas like in my youth, like I was one of very few Asians, so I didn't really have a lot of people to navigate that with. And I think like just it also like kind of helped me expand on my understanding of Chinese culture as well, or an Asian culture. It's just like there's not like one way to appreciate it. There's like just so many people to like relate to, and so much. I don't know. I think it just helped. Yeah, it definitely helped a lot. It just felt a lot less alone.
So you went to school at UCLA. You did the whole 5 years in engineering, and where did that kind of lead you to, like, career-wise?
Well, I'm not doing engineering now, but yeah. So that was kind of another life-changing moment in college was, well, I guess there's a lot, but like with regards to like career, I think basically all of up until college, I was like very used to being like at or near the top of my class. And at UCLA, it's like everyone, then you gather a group of everyone who's like that, and all of a sudden you're not like, you're just like average.
Yeah, so that was a big shock for you.
Yeah, for sure. Just realizing that like you're not that special academically, which, for better or worse, that like, I'm totally fine with how my life played out. But like, I did fine as an engineering student. Specifically, I studied electrical engineering, and I think like my choice in like as a senior in high school making that decision, I was like, I don't want to do programming because that seems hard, and then I don't want to do other types of engineering because I don't know. I just for whatever reason I picked electrical engineering. And throughout college, I actually started to appreciate computer programming and software a little bit more. Like if I could go back, I probably would have done that as a major because it's so relevant today. But yeah, towards the end of my college career, I started learning more about computer science and programming, and I actually had like I guess I'd call it like a quarter life crisis in college. Like I just kind of broke down and questioned like literally everything. Like, what's the point of friendships? What's the point of family? Like, not that I had a doubt that those things were important, but like I just didn't have an answer of my own. I had like coming into my senior year of college, I started reading the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and chapter 2 is begin with the end in mind. So it's like basically it has you write down everything that you see yourself being at the end of your life. And I think like there's probably like, it's been a while since I read it, but basically I ended up writing like, how did I want my senior year to go? And it's like, I want to get good grades. I want to be a good leader to my dance team. I want to be a good boyfriend to my ex, who I'm not with anymore, obviously. But, just all these things. And I just felt like the pressure mounting so much because I had never had that much on my plate, and I just started questioning like why do I want these things? And then I started realizing like everything I wanted at that point, up until that point, felt like it was the desires were like given to me to want, and they weren't coming from innately within myself. So I just took a long time to kind of reevaluate everything, like the importance of family, the importance of friends, like why am I an engineer, blah, blah, blah. Like, why am I here on this earth? And that was a pretty pivotal moment for me where I just found my own answers to those things. And then eventually decided that like I wasn't
going to pursue electrical engineering, but rather entrepreneurship, much to the chagrin of my parents. Because it's like, why are we paying you to get an education at UCLA to be an engineer if you're not going to do it? But I just started reading more and more books. Tony Robbins had a pretty big impact on me, and I think I just like fell in love with the idea that like the energy that I put into my career and creativity should have a broader impact on society. And like I'm okay with not having like a stable paycheck with like a cookie cutter job in order to pursue that. I think that was like my core realization with regards to my career.
It seems like you found like your calling of words, like you realize that it's not always just about your own kind of paycheck. It's about providing value and impacting other people around you and the world so that you can gain value from that. Like it's a lot of just kind of self-reflecting and being introspective, where it's like, what does it mean to be a person on this earth, and kind of what you're trying to contribute to the society as a whole, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great.
It's like, like we never grew up religious. My parents are like slightly Buddhist. So I never had really explored those questions before. And like, I mean, I still have more exploring to do for sure. But like, I think for me, it's like, I don't necessarily know like why I'm on this earth, but I do know that like I've been dealt a pretty good hand, you know, all things considered, with my parents and my upbringing and where I grew up and going to UCLA, having studied engineering there. Like I have a lot of skills and privileges that other people don't have. So I feel like it's my obligation to spread that and create value and positivity for other people.
Yeah. So it seems like you've gone through that kind of quarter life crisis when you're just about to finish school, and you made those changes and you become who you are now. And like a lot of things that I've seen in your kind of like social media and like just your YouTube videos is very kind of, it gives off the impression like you already very in tune with who you are as a person and like just know what you're doing, which I'm sure there's more to that, of course, but like I just kind of want to talk about like another aspect beyond just like career and stuff, but your like actual relationship with your family. So would you say your relationship with your family is a little more different after you came out of like the whole quarter life crisis in terms of like reevaluating everything?
I think so. It took a while for sure. Like I was a terrible son for a while. Like in college, like I would like not pick up on their calls. Like, yeah, I was a terrible son. Like I always loved them, but I think like gradually like our relationship got better and better for sure throughout my 20s. And now it's like the best that it's ever been. But like, I think another inflection point for my relationship with my dad, at least, in 2015, a business that I was working on was doing pretty well, and I was like, I'm just gonna take my dad to China for a month, and just like pay for it, and because he hasn't been back since he immigrated, and I've never been there. So we just went there for a month, and we went through like Beijing, Shanghai. Anyway, we just like basically started up north, and we made our way to Guangzhou, where he grew up, and that was incredible. Like I think just getting to have an extended period of time to like just sit down with him and talk to him was just great. Like I think more than any attractions we saw in China, that was just like really special to, you know, just sit down with him and talk for that long.
That's very cool and impressive. Like it's great because usually when you hear like, oh, if like a son or a daughter can afford to do these kind of things, they're normally to be like, oh, dad, you can just go yourself and, you know, whatever. But you took the time to like go with him and like explore with him and learn a great deal for you and your dad. So that's great.
Yeah, actually, like it was interesting on the plane ride there. The first thing he asked me was like, "Are you mad at me for not spending more time with you as a kid?"
Oh, wow.
I was like, that was the first thing he asked me. I was like, what? No, of course not. Like you did what you had to do. But it was just so interesting that like, you know, he'd never asked me that before, but like he had that lingering thought about, I think naturally probably most fathers have that thought, like, did I do enough for my kid? And so it was just interesting that he asked me that like right away. But yeah, After that trip, I learned a lot about my parents and how they met, and like my favorite memories were just like sitting down and having tea with him. We went back to his village in Toisan, and it was just really cool to see him in his element because he had like this, like people knew that he was back in China. So like everyone in his old village, there must have been like 30 people. They were just like there to welcome him, and he was like the star of the show. Yeah. He was so charismatic. He was like putting his arm around people, laughing, telling jokes. So it was just really cool to see him in that element. And I also learned a lot of things about his upbringing. I knew the high level details. Like he was separated from his parents when he was 12, so he basically raised himself. And that was because his parents basically wanted to get away from communism, and they went to Hong Kong. Yeah. But the laws were that you couldn't take anyone with you to Hong Kong that's over the age of 12. So him and his brothers basically had to fend for themselves. Yeah. I mean, like his parents would send back money and stuff, but like from a parental standpoint, like he had to basically fend for himself. So what I didn't know on that trip was like he had tried to escape 3 or 4 times. So he was always like pretty athletic, but I didn't realize that like he was staying in shape so that he could like physically endure escaping. So like he climbed a mountain at night for 5 days, and then after that 5 days at night, he like swam for like 4 hours to Hong Kong only to get caught. Yeah. And so it was kind of sad. Like he never saw his mom again. Like he was trying to escape he made like, I think the later escape attempts. He was trying to escape because he knew his mother was sick. And he was trying to see her before she died. And yeah, so he tried to escape to see her. He got caught. I think he found out that his mom died in jail. So it was just like a really heartbreaking story to hear. Actually, when I got back home from China, I just cried because I was just it all just hit me at once, like how much my dad has been through. Both my parents actually, but like just how hard their lives were. It was just a lot to process all at once. Like not that I didn't know that intellectually, but like viscerally I had a much deeper understanding, like seeing where they grew up and hearing the stories and like walking in the areas that they walked on. So like the whole experience kind of helped you kind of understand your parents more and see them more as of a human being rather than just being like them being a dad or a mother. To kind of humanize them, which I would guess really helped strengthen your relationship overall with your dad and your mom. Yeah, for sure. It's just like seeing that struggle and how much they went through. Yeah. And then like it's like now that I just became a dad, like I realize that even more, raising a child, like damn, this is what you did for me. This is like a lot, you know. So yeah, you talking about your like your child is like, how do you feel like you as a dad kind of like in terms of how you deal with things now with your kid? I know he's still young and stuff, but what do you think you kind of learn from your experience and your relationship with your dad, and what you're gonna have to bring forward or kind of do differently so that your kid could be in an environment where you want them to be in, like the best possible? Like, have you really thought too much about it, or is kind of just taking it day by day? Yeah, for sure. I mean, my wife and I talk about it pretty often, not every day, but like fairly regularly, like how we want our kids to be raised. And I think, we there's a lot of positivity to take from how we were raised. There's a lot that we would improve upon. I think my parents, like, I think the biggest thing they taught me was just unconditional love. Like, no matter what, they're sticking together for each other. They're always going to love us no matter like how ungrateful we are as kids. Like they're just always there for us. So I think just experiencing that level of pureness and generosity and like selflessness is like, damn, like I want to emulate that for my kids. And I think like, their work ethic, I think like a lot of immigrant parents is like unparalleled. So I would love for my kids to see that not only in me, but like in understanding their story. And I think like for sure, we talked about like communication before earlier, and I definitely want to have, 1,000 times better of a communication channel than I did with my parents. And I think, our starting point is a lot better because we're plausibly both going to speak English. But yeah, And I think like, just being able to have not just an abundance of like money, which we didn't have growing up, but like an abundance of time just to be able to be present and be physical positive influence in our kids' lives, which is like not something that my parents had the luxury of doing because, they had to afford raising us. So yeah, I think like those are probably the major things that I think about.
Yeah, I like my wife and I just got married, but like we've been like thinking about like
congrats.
And we've been like thinking like our future in terms of like kids and all that stuff, what we want to kind of instill, and you kind of hit all the points that we kind of always kind of talk about it when we talk about like children and all that stuff. But I'm also curious about how do you feel like you want to kind of raise or kind of like teach them in terms of like their identity and their like kind of culture and their like Asianness and also Americanness at the same time, like because for us, those that are growing up with immigrant parents, they didn't really help that much in terms of helping us be firm with our identities for the most part. It wasn't really something they thought of. But given our experiences now, do you kind of have an idea of how you kind of shape your children in terms of their own identity and how they would take upon like the different cultures that they're gonna grow up with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think on like a lot of different levels, there's a lot of ways to answer this question. But I think like for sure, just to kind of appreciate where they come from, because I feel like the trend, maybe this is wrong, but like I think that this could easily be a trend where like the more generations down we progress through America, like the easier it is to lose the traditions that, my parents grew up with. And so a big part of the reason why I'm doing this YouTube channel is to just celebrate that and have something that our kids can refer to in the future, when they're older enough to understand it, and just to see like where they came from. Yeah, so I think that's a really important thing. Like I want to learn my dad's cooking so that they can experience it, like experience the joy that I had growing up, like tasting all this delicious Chinese food. So that's, one thing. I hope I definitely hope they learn Chinese and they're able to converse with their grandparents. But I think also too, it's like, I think hopefully we'll be able to help them navigate like what it means to be Chinese American. I think my wife has a similar experience with me. Like she's half white, half Chinese. So arguably she has, that even deeper of an identity conflict than I did. But I think we're more armed to help them navigate that if that should come up. And then I think with like in terms of like diversity is just like and equality and discrimination. I think there's just so much to say about that, but I think like just to help them understand that there's so much diversity to be celebrated, and regardless of what ethnicity we come from, we are at the core of it humans. And at the same time, it's like just to recognize that there are things in place that hinder certain ethnicities and advance other ethnicities, and just to help them
for sure
like realize that they're a part of that.
Yeah. And do you have any concerns as a parent now, given like the current climate and stuff for your child? Like as a parent, I assume like certain things kind of in the world right now is not really what you kind of imagine for them to be growing up in. Like do you have any kind of like alarming concern that kind of just keeps you up at night sometimes?
I'm pretty optimistic that by the time they're kind of old enough to navigate that there will be more progress made.
Yeah.
Also, I think like, I don't know, maybe this is like way too optimistic, but I feel like the collective consciousness of the world is trending upwards. As much negativity as there is in the news, I think like if you look at the overall stats, things are getting better every day. So I think I'm hopeful that the world that our kids grow up in will be much more equitable and kind and compassionate than what my parents grew up in, what I grew up in.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope.
We all hope. Yeah, for sure. And the reason that I came to know of you is through like just what you do on YouTube, your channel Made With Lau, like a cooking kind of program where your dad cooks a meal and guides people through, and then you have conversations with your family about it and all that stuff. So I want to be more nosy about it. It's like how are you able to do this? Because right off the bat, like everything that you do is so professional, and everything is kind of all
Thank you.
prepared up, like how a cooking show would be on TV. It's like, especially when this is not really your career, like at all, like to start with. It's kind of more like a creative project that you have starting in September, like all that stuff. So can you just talk us through like your process of like from beginning, like how you started and all that stuff, and where do you get all of this from? Like, it's interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, first, I mean, just to like preface all of this, like I think like all of the cinematography and like all that stuff, there would be no story there without my parents. So I think like that, you take all that away, and I think like it's still pretty entertaining to watch my dad and us talk, just because they have a story to tell, and I think that's at the core of it, like it's just sharing that story. But I think like throughout my career, I never set out to like do a YouTube channel. Like if you asked me graduating from college, like this is what you'd be doing, like 10 years later, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
I didn't even know YouTube wasn't even really a thing back then. But I think like things in the past decade have kind of groomed me for being able to do this more creatively. Like I spent a lot of time figuring out how to, just like I spent a lot of time like in digital marketing with my wife. Like we quit our jobs just to kind of blaze our own paths in entrepreneurship. And then part of how we funded that for so long was just consulting other businesses on how to market themselves online. So that like just that process of learning, like, okay, how do you tell a story online? How do you like convey, like, we're not trying to get anyone to buy anything with Made With Lau, but like just all that work in like crafting a message online, like helps out with what we're doing now. I think even like dance helped me, like just choreograph, like spending a lot of time like mulling over song choices and movement and like setting a mood and telling a story there. It's like that helps. Like I think for a while I was just like, a lot of my career in the past has been like focused on tech startups, and I've tried my hand at a few. Some did okay, but like like all the skills I learned in software development helped me build the blog. So it's like but I think as a result of like burnout from startups, like I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna, I like photography, videography. I'm just gonna challenge myself to edit and share a video every day on Instagram. And so it's just like on my personal Instagram, I called it like Project 365, but with video. And I just, for like 3.5 years, I just edited a video every day, like with no intention of monetizing or growing like a huge Instagram following. I was just like, all right, I just like the craft of it, so I'm just gonna get better at it, and that helped a lot for sure. And yeah, just all these like things that aligned into like crafting the skill set that I have now to help me tell our parents' story more effectively. It's like you would never like connect all the dots. But looking back, it's like, oh, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think like Steve Jobs, he had like a graduation speech about that. I'm not going to say it nearly as elegantly as he did, but like the stars kind of aligned. Even like COVID taking one of our businesses out of commission and like kind of forcing us to reevaluate, what's important to us. How do we want to leave a legacy? It just made a lot of sense. But I guess to go back to the original question, it just takes a lot of time, for sure. Like each video takes us like 40 to 50 hours. Wow. Yeah, it's a lot. So we film on average like once a week, and the film day is usually like getting set up, filming my dad talking through the recipe. We eat it, we film that, and then I film him again, but in silence. And like, you could probably see it if you look closely, but like we do a second take where he doesn't talk at all, but there's like this wooden rig over the counter that like shoots downwards, so I can get like all those overhead details. And then there's like a slider, like a mechanical slider. So that's just something I like to have, just another take. And And then we spend like an hour or two like just laying everything out and like styling the food and doing more of like, I call them like feature shots. So that's like a pretty long day of filming. Editing is just, I'm getting faster at it, but it just takes a long time to put together because I think a lot of our creative decisions are driven by like our family, especially our kids. It's like my dad doesn't speak English, so I need to have subtitles.
I was gonna get to that. Like, that's impressive. Like, I can't believe the amount of effort you do with your subtitles. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So actually, like, my big shout out to my cousin Winnie, because she helps out. I don't speak Chinese fluently. I can't write it. So, but I can understand my dad well enough to like transcribe what he's saying in English. And then I just feed her that English transcription, and then she turns it into Chinese. And then, but yeah, it's like the reason we have it in 2 languages is like I want my dad to understand what I'm saying. I want my kids to understand what my dad's saying. Like, my wife doesn't speak Chinese either, so it's like if you don't have that subtitle, like that's like a language barrier in itself. And like I just want to remove all of those barriers. And then I think like for me, I feel like every dish has a story, whether it's personal or like historical or cultural. I just want to highlight like and celebrate everything that surrounds, like, more than just like what's in it, how do you make it, just like. And that's a big reason I spend a lot of like maybe too much time on like padding the recipe video with where it came from
But I really appreciate that, like with your newest video where it's about sweet and sour soup, you went into like about the peppercorn and all that stuff. Was like very specific information that, of course, if it's a regular video of how to cook the food, you don't really need that, but then you added in that, it creates more of a like understanding and more kind of a deeper kind of connection to the food. And I think that's great, and that's what set you and your video and your channel apart.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's like just telling a story, because like I think like, I mean, there's a lot of like how-to content on YouTube, and like ours, if you only had to put like one category on it, like it's like how to cook stuff. But like I just like, you take away like the channel and subscribers and like growth and etc. It's just like I just want our kids to have, just to be able to understand like the culture of Chinese cuisine and where it came from. So it's like if I only included like how to make this dish, like I feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity for not just for our kids, but like people who are interested in like Chinese culture, whether or not you're Chinese, to kind of connect with that.
And like my other question about your whole kind of operation is like, how did you even get your parents to kind of be game to do this kind of thing? Because they're pretty much at this point where it's like, oh, I just do whatever I want, and there's no really big like work or career kind of like pressure. It's just like relaxing and all that stuff. But like for you to get them to be like, oh, let's film a video once a week and cooking food and all that stuff and being on camera, I think that's a big thing. Like, how do you get them like comfortable being on camera and all that stuff?
Wow, yeah, that's a good question. A big part of it is my mom, and I don't think I've like given my mom enough attention because she's an awesome human being, and she's like the hardest worker I know. I mean, my dad is too, but I think in a different way. She's insane. But anyway, so I think she really like glues a lot of it together, because like my dad is fairly impatient. Like he just likes to rush through things, and like he's like, before this channel, like if I asked him how to make a dish, he'd be like, oh, just a spoonful of this, like use this one random bowl that only I have, use 1 scoop of that, and that's how you make a dish. So I'm like, obviously you can't like teach someone else how to do a dish if you don't have standardized measurements. So that's like one specific example, but like my mom is like on the same page as me, kind of making sure that we rein my dad in that way. But like when I approached them about the channel, my mom was like immediately on board, which was really cool. Because like at the end of the day, like she always tells me to like get a job, like go work at Google or something, get us, or get health insurance. But I think she understands, like if you put in the time, she understands that YouTube is just as viable, if not more, than like a standard 9 to 5. So she was like,
Mm-hmm.
she was like, she sees other she watches other food YouTubers, and she's like, oh, we could do that. Like my wife and I, every quarter we do a retreat, just us two, just to like talk about our life and career. And then in March we started talking about doing this, and then we were kind of like going in. My wife was like, oh well, we should just suggest it to them, you know, kind of test it out, see what they think. And then we talked to them, and then immediately my mom was like, oh yeah, and if we film, we got to get like one of those portable stoves so we can film on the island, and then we got to clean up our kitchen so that, you know, it looks nice. So she was like all in. She was already thinking of, you know, how to make it professional.
So in a sense, she could be a YouTuber herself.
Yeah.
If she had that drive, like she knows all the stuff to be aware of and all that stuff. She's in the know, I guess.
Yeah.
Crazy.
She watches enough YouTube where like the very first day, I mean, like my parents are both naturals. Like rarely do we do more than one take of something. Like, so like the first day we started filming, like I'm still figuring everything out. Like I don't know how it's going to go. My parents just like jump right into it and like just start teaching. Like my dad's been cooking for like 50 years. So like he knows he could like cook all these like hundreds of recipes in his sleep without rehearsing them. So he just knows it like the back of his hand. So he's just really talking about what he already knows. And then my mom, I thought it'd be cute for her to like kind of do all the outros of our videos. And without me prompting her, she was like, and make sure you subscribe and like our video. And I was like, what the?
Like, I didn't know you knew this.
Yeah. So they're both like naturals in their own way. And like, I think like, I feel like, you know, they could have been celebrities in another life, you know, like they're just so charismatic in their own way.
Yeah. So as a whole, how do they kind of look at this kind of project that you're doing? Like, are they just looking at it where it's like, oh, we're just having fun, like family time, just that you're putting cameras in front of us when we're having family time? Or do they see this as something like where it's kind of your job and like YouTube creation is kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think the latter. They like from day one, I approached it like essentially like a business. Like, I mean, we are trying to provide like this legacy for our kids and our future generations, but also it's like the level of like to stay consistent with, you know, the production quality and staying on schedule and promoting it as much as we do. It's like, it takes a lot of time, and it's not something, it's kind of like well over the time that I would spend on something casual.
Yeah.
So my parents, like when we started talking about it, like we all had that kind of understanding that, you know, this is going to be something that we really, at least, that we really like dedicate ourselves to. And I think my dad is, for my dad, I think he just wants me to like film him as much as possible because he
likes the camera.
Yeah. I mean, but I think like also it's like, he's not getting any younger, and like, you know, he just wants me to like document as much as I can.
That's great.
And like so much so that I'm like, I can't film as much as you want me to because editing takes so long.
Yeah.
And I think for my mom, actually, it's kind of funny. Like they both have, like in YouTube, they have a studio app, which is like all the analytics, like subscribers.
Also, they're checking that as well.
Yeah, they check like every hour.
Wow, they're as committed as you are.
Yeah, they might check more than I do, and I check it a lot. So like I was having dinner with them one day, and they're like, oh yeah, our most recent video did like, you know, whatever, like 4,000 views, and my dad was like, oh no, I'm pretty sure it was like 4,200. So it's just so they're like pretty invested in it.
Did they tell you that their friends seen them on YouTube yet, or it's not at that point yet? Or do they tell everyone about it already to their friends and their families?
Yeah, I think that like our relatives are watching it. It's pretty funny. Like I met there, I think it was in the Facebook group Subtle Cantonese Traits. Like I was sharing our video there, and then this girl was commenting, and we like had a conversation in the comment thread, and then we started messaging, and then she showed her mom the video, and then her mom was like, oh, that's my cousin. So
Really?
So
Wow.
like I'm related to her. Like I met like my second
wow.
cousin through a Facebook group promoting these videos.
That's crazy.
It's like, yeah, and like we still talk. Like they just texted, like my cousin made our most recent video, hot and sour soup, and sent it to her mom, and then her mom sent it to my dad. My dad was like, "Hey,
Wow.
your cousin made this. Did you see it?" So
Crazy.
yeah, just it's a small world. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been like, I think to that end, it's been really cool to give them more recognition. You know, it's like I think people are like really coming to love who they are, and like they appreciate like my dad's cooking. They appreciate my mom's like cuteness and all the encouraging things she has to say. And
it also doesn't help that we can get to see your cute baby as well.
yeah. So it's just nice to like give them that recognition that they deserve for, you know, all the years they spent like struggling to raise us.
Yeah, I feel like with your channel, I get a lot of it. One is nice seeing like an Asian family just having good, like literally positive like vibes, like cooking dinner and just eating it as a family, and also just you like doing a lot of work trying to like preserve what knowledge that your dad has in terms of cooking, Chinese cooking, and all that stuff. And I think most importantly, I feel like you kind of create a community for possibly a lot of immigrant children in the West or just diaspora Asian as a whole, where they could look into your kind of videos, see kind of what you're making and do it themselves to reconnect with their own kind of Asianness or like with the food that they grew up eating and all that stuff. So I think you're doing such great things right now with the channel, and I'm really enjoying the content.
Thank you. That means a lot.
And in terms of like where you want to take it even further, like right now, it's still a lot of focus on just you creating a video where your dad will cook a certain recipe of his, and then you guys kind of sit down and eat it and share stories and stuff. Do you think that will be continuing the kind of the role you want to take, or you kind of want to take it even further, like in terms of like other types of videos? Do you have any kind of ideas?
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of directions that, you know, my wife and I talk a lot about a lot of the different directions we could take. And it's like, it's really exciting to think about, but it's also like, how am I going to have time to do anything other than what I'm doing right now?
Yeah.
Cause this already takes like all of my time. But, I think like I'd love to do like, just sit them down and interview them about like key moments in their life. Like just dive into how my dad escaped from or tried to escape from China, or like how they met, or ask them, you know, more like deeper existential questions and just see what their thoughts are on it. I feel like it would just be interesting to like get their thoughts on that and just understand them as people. Like I don't know how like on the marketing side, like no one's searching for that, you know, like from an SEO perspective, but like I think it's important to tell that story, and if for no one else, just for like our kids to see it and like to understand who their grandparents are. And I also think like people would relate to that, you know, like I think our parents, my upbringing isn't that unique, and my parents' story isn't, I mean, it is unique, but like I think it's very relatable. So I think just spreading that story of like resilience and taking a big risk and, you know, making something of themselves in America, I think is in itself like a story worth telling. I have a software background, so I'd love to make like an app where people can, you know, just quickly access our recipes, and eventually like a cookbook. Just again, if no one bought it, it'd just be nice to have like a book that we could pass down through the
like
ages.
A family heirloom kind of thing, where like this is all this stuff. And I think it will help with like your children and your like offsprings and generations in terms of like something documented of like what life was like and what things matter to the family and all that stuff.
Yeah. And then just putting like, this would be like wild, but like if we were ever on like Netflix, that would be insane. You know, I don't know what for, but like just giving them recognition at that level would be so awesome.
So it seems like your whole kind of project with Made With Lau is just for your kid, in terms of having them able to see their grandparents at what they do and what they know, and just promoting like Chinese food and what your dad has done. I think that's really good already.
Yeah, for sure. Also, it's like, I think it's like just celebrating who they are, honoring their legacy, and like celebrating our culture with the world. I think it's like, it's just And also it's like, I have like this mission statement that I read every day, and it's like we just want to, the mission statement is we want to warm the hearts and bellies of millions of people and families around the world. And I think at its core, it's just like, if we could make someone's day a little brighter by watching our video, or even better, if a dish that we share helps them create a tradition with people they love, that would be amazing, because that's what
that's
I grew up
great,
with.
yeah.
Just spreading that would be so cool, because that's how much that's like so intertwined with the memories I have of my dad. It's just like the food that he made was made with so much love, and it would just be so cool to share that with, or like to kind of like seed that around the world.
Yeah, all you're saying is like, I love what you're doing, and like I can't wait for more. Like I think you're really doing something really great. You got like, I think I haven't seen something like what you're doing in terms of like cooking and all that stuff, and storytelling. Like I'm not saying obviously you're not the only one doing it, but like the uniqueness of what you're doing, I think is really great. And if you can tell like the audience, like in terms of all the videos you've done so far, what kind of recipe kind of really speaks to you, like you, in terms of like your favorite kind of food to eat, or just like overall like the filming experience? Do you have like 2 or 3 you want to share?
Dang. I think, okay, off the top of my head, vegetable lo mein is a dish that we always have like at big parties.
Yeah.
And that dish, that video in particular, it's just so happy. And it's it's for my dad's 75th birthday, and he always, like, for every birthday he always goes like all out. He usually cooks like 12 courses. So we just decided to make a video out of it. And it's not the typical mealtime where we're like, my wife and I are asking my parents questions, but it's just like, I interviewed my mom basically, and she just has all these great things to say about my dad and her wishes for him. It's just like something that I'm so glad we have. It's just really heartwarming and wholesome. I think taste wise, this is not something that people would really think to cook all the time, but ginger fried rice.
Oh, I like that a lot too.
Is amazing. Like we had it. That's another special dish for my wife and I, because like I had never had it up until my son was born, and I didn't know this, but like ginger is something that Chinese parents cook a lot for moms who are recovering from birth. So my dad went out and bought like 10 pounds of ginger in anticipation of us giving birth. And it's like the first dish that I grabbed in the hospital. We had to stay there for a few days. So I was like, hey dad, can you make us food, because hospital food isn't that great. So he made us ginger fried rice. So that was like the first time I had it, and we like devoured it. It's like so good. Those would probably be my 2. And if I had to name a third, chicken congee is, I think everyone has an experience with like eating juk or congee growing up. And he has some pretty cool tips in there that I didn't know of. Like you can whisk the rice to make it softer. So yeah, those would be my 3, but they're all really good.
Yeah, they're all really good. And something I noticed is like, it's like all the food that you have shown in your channel, it's just very kind of simple, kind of very Cantonese kind of food, where it's like so easy to eat and just so good. I every one of them, like for the most part, I had it growing up, and it's always so good. And it's like you got some that are more like home kind of meal like dishes, like steamed egg, and then you could have like literally hot and sour soup that normally you wouldn't make at home as a Cantonese household. You will get it at a restaurant, but it's still so good. Like you got stuff for everyone. Like even if your cooking level isn't as high, you still have something you can make in your channel.
Yeah, totally. I think like something we never really talked about this, but like I think my dad's philosophy is that he wants to make things as accessible as possible. Like I think there are a lot of other great channels out there that, go into, really great refined ingredients, like, and like how to get that like perfect taste. Not to say that my dad doesn't have that perfect taste, but like it's just like you're busy, you're working, you're a parent, like blah blah blah, whatever. It's like, how can you create a really delicious meal easily? And I think that's like because that's what he grew up with, you know. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I think that's like his take on it.
Mm-hmm.
We've never like said that out loud to each other, but I
Yeah.
think that's how he approaches it.
Yeah, I could feel that kind of vibe. And do you actually have like a favorite dish that your dad makes that you haven't shown on the channel and that you potentially might do it?
Yes. So when I started thinking about this channel, I was like, we have to do this dish called Tong Yun.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like for if you've never heard of it, for people listening, it's like sticky rice balls.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like sweet versions of it that I think are popular in Taiwan, but my dad.
Oh, your dad does the salty one?
Yeah, he does this. Yeah, so it's like a Taiwanese style, which is the village that they're from. It's so good, and like that's like easily hands down my favorite dish from him. And
Yeah,
like,
and for those who don't know, like what makes it savory, like what things are inside the sticky rice ball that makes it savory?
The rice ball itself, at least the way my dad makes it, I don't think he marinates it or does anything. It's just like glutinous rice flour rolled up into a ball. But like the soup is like packed with savory goodness. Like there's like dried shrimp and chicken and like a ton of like vegetables, and just feels like a warm hug in your mouth when you eat it.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. So would you say that that's like your high up like favorite kind of Chinese dish, or if I have you say your top 3 Chinese dishes, would it be up there?
Yeah, that's for sure up there. That dish is for sure up there, just because it brings up so much nostalgia and it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really tough. I think if you asked me like a few years ago, I'd be like, you know, all the noodle dishes.
Mm-hmm.
But recently I've started trying to like count my calories and eat less carbs. So I can't do too
That's
many
tough.
of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one of the most like favorite dishes that you made so far, I would say would be definitely like either the steamed spare ribs or like mapo tofu.
Yeah.
Like those two are like just make me think of home all the time. And like back when I was a young kid, like steamed spare rib was so easy to make for the family. It's like you pop it in and steam while you're cooking the rice, and it's still so good.
Yeah. It's like, it's pretty like, I have just watching him make these things, it's like simultaneously I'm like, damn, that's so good. Like I have so much more of a deeper appreciation for the skill and the art of it. But at the same time, I'm like, that's actually not that hard. Like,
Yeah, it really is.
yeah. So
But
it's
yeah,
like encouraging in both ways.
Mm-hmm. And I just hope to see more and more videos come out of making like dishes. Hopefully the ones that I really like. But so far you've been hitting home runs with all the food you're making, like hot and sour soup, awesome. And then the chicken congee and the spare ribs, and like it's so easy to just follow along and just make. And you also have like a website where you have the recipe on where you can just adjust the quantity you need for like the right amount. So it's perfect. So can you just kind of plug your website and also like your YouTube channel and where people can find you and learn more?
Yeah. So pretty much everywhere, on every platform, we have the username Made With Lau. That's LAU. Our website is madewithlau.com. I'm really proud of that website because I built it from scratch, from using all the skills I had from like my app startup days. And yeah, there's like videos on there that you can follow along with. There's like you were saying, adjustable ingredients, a lot more stuff that I want to do with it, but I really want it to be like one of the best food websites out there. And yeah, on Instagram, Made With Lau, Pinterest, Made With Lau, YouTube, Made With Lau. Yeah, we post a recipe every single Tuesday, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you want some classic Chinese recipes, Made With Lau, I think it's the best place to find them. And it's only going to get better as they keep going. And thank you so much for your time. It was such a great conversation. I enjoyed talking to you so much, learning from you and your experiences.
Likewise, you had really great questions. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, best of luck with everything. And I hope to see more of what you think you want to do beyond just the recipes and stuff, like your conversation with your parents and just kind of knowing their story, because I'll be interested too. Because I think for me, I always wanted to kind of ask my grandparents of like, how was it like growing up in China and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be an interesting video for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I am pretty pretty positive that we will do that as long as my parents are game to like share all that stuff. But
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much for doing this, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. You too. It was great talking with you.
Thank you for listening to What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. I'm your host. My name is Kyle, and make sure to subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you listen to podcasts on, and also follow my Instagram at KYLE.LKHHK.